So I saw Jordan Peele's Nope yesterday, and I haven't experienced many fictions like it. Ever. And I'm very particular in calling it an experience rather than a story because it breaks nearly every convention of traditional storytelling in some way or another. Of course, Jordan Peele is not known for being a cookie cutter storyteller at all anyway. Get Out was a fresh take on the intersection of horror, comedy, and a racial conversation that I don't think any of us were expecting. Us was a fever dream that barely ever made sense while watching it and somehow became even more confusing thinking about it on the way home. So yeah, it makes sense that Jordan's third film would be a mystifying, amorphous cocktail of science fiction, mystery, horror, social commentary, and a nice little rim sprinkling of comedy just to keep the journey enjoyable. Honestly, it's a bit difficult to talk about this movie at all without completely giving away so much of the surprise that makes it great, but I will do my best to be an abusive gardener and beat around the bush as best I can for those who haven't seen it yet. I guess the first thing I do want to talk about though is the great performances of the cast, because the first two acts of the film, if you can even call them that, were built upon an extremely slow burn with wildly disconnected pieces that only mesh together later on. For most films, incohesion like that would be a death sentence, but Daniel Kaluuya, Keke Palmer, Stephen Yeun, Keith David, and more did a great job of just being plain enjoyable on camera. So much of this movie is kind of just understanding these characters as people and seeing how they interact with each other. They each have their own quote-unquote journeys, but also like, not really. The characters are paradoxically very simple yet truly engaging, and I think a large part of this was because the actors did such a great job of bringing them to life. There was one scene in particular where Stephen Yeun had a 1,000-yard stare so deep, empty, tragic, and convincing that I thought a still PNG of him was superimposed onto the scene. Daniel Kaluuya plays OJ and Keke Palmer plays his sister M, and that dual sibling tension and love is the core of the movie's emotional journey. It's both of these characters figuring out how to progress forward with the pain that the film's main conflict has caused, and they both have a different outlook that ultimately comes to a head in the climax. And what a climax it is. Again, I'm nearly in a cold sweat trying not to spoil this movie, but I can't remember the last time I had so much fun just experiencing an event with the characters in a fiction. This film has to be seen on the big screen, and honestly, I've always kind of hated that distinction of movies not being able to be seen on a phone or a smaller TV screen, but this honestly is one of them, because so much of the marvel and mystery of its action sequences are enhanced by the rumbling bass that you can feel in your bones, and the massive scale of the monstrously large antagonist that plagues our characters. But make no mistake, this movie is also not for the faint of heart. The sound design is probably the most stunning aspect of the film, and there were moments of complete and total immersion in human suffering, like the likes of which I had not experienced before. The horrid screams and groans and lamentations of the victims within this film still ring in my head right now. Anyone who's seen Annihilation and remembers the bear knows exactly what I'm talking about. And since a UFO is in the release trailers and promotional material, I feel I can discuss that aspect of the film here without wandering too deep into spoiler territory. Hands down, probably the most visually stunning UFO I have ever seen on screen. It completely steals the show in every sequence it appears in, and that is kind of crazy since it's literally just a flat disc hovering in the sky. Yet, somehow, there is a definite personality and personification that Jordan Peele is able to infuse into this nigh incomprehensible alien construct, and that still wows me to this moment. Of course, the film does have its flaws, like any film. I think because of the supreme aura of mystery, the simplicity of the final sequence does produce a tinge of letdown. Also, the first basically hour and a half is all set up for the exciting back end of the film, and again, even though the actors and characters are great, there is a definite molasses-like feeling of a slow burn, especially after the heart-pounding hook at the beginning. Some of the characters felt like they had a lot of narrative meat and potatoes left on the table too, as their backgrounds were only hinted at and not deeply explored, making some of their decisions seem weird when placed against the whole of the story. Still, with all these flaws, I'm definitely going to see this movie again, as it's almost mandatory with any Jordan Peele creation to get a full sense of what it actually was trying to tell you. There's foreshadowing and subtle hints and clues laid out all throughout the framework of the narrative, and now that I know what to expect from the pacing, I think I will enjoy the ride even more, knowing when to let myself feel the sways and ebbs and flows of this experience. Lastly, the message of the film. If there is one singular message, it's not spelled out for you. Instead, it takes some digging and sitting and waiting, but what I can say is that the story did a great job of bringing to light the risks, rewards, and ethics of animals and children in the grasp of Hollywood. Three of the main characters had their lives dictated and indelibly changed by cinema's use and periodic abuse and disregard for animals. I certainly wasn't expecting a message like this going in, but it was one that I appreciated coming out. Nope is arguably my favorite Jordan Peele film, which is great because I slightly soured on him after the overly esoteric nature of Us left me wanting. In my estimation, Get Out still is his best overall work as a total film, but Nope is definitely a can't miss experience.